When Officer Reynolds pulls over a seemingly ordinary woman, his day takes a turn for the worse. What starts as a routine traffic stop turns into a dangerous game of intimidation as the cop escalates the situation, unaware that he's picking a fight with a federal agent who's about to put him in his place. Before Reynolds realizes his mistake, quickly comment down from where in the world you are watching this, so we can go deep into the story. The air around them feels thick, almost tangible, pressing in with the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Reynolds stands there for a moment, frozen in place, as the silence stretches between them. The hum of the engine is the only sound, and the faint creak of the sedan's suspension as Sarah shifts in her seat. Reynolds' jaw tightens. He's not used to being challenged. Most people cower under the authority of his badge. They apologize, they plead, they beg. But not her. Not this woman. "I'm not asking," he says, his voice now carrying a hard edge, a tone that dares her to resist. He knows he's pushing it. He knows this is a minor infraction, but something in her demeanor has triggered something darker inside him. Maybe it's the calmness in her eyes. Maybe it's the way she doesn't bend, doesn't break. Whatever it is, it's unsettling. And for Reynolds, unsettling is something he can't allow. Sarah meets his gaze with the same quiet intensity, unflinching, unmoved. There's a moment where time seems to slow, as if the universe itself is holding its breath. She doesn't move. Doesn't speak. He feels the tension hanging in the air like a storm cloud, waiting to burst. Finally, with a sigh that almost seems like pity, she opens the door and steps out. Her movements are slow, deliberate, and graceful, nothing rushed, nothing frantic. Reynolds watches her every step, his mind racing with thoughts he can't quite organize. Why isn't she scared? Why isn't she trembling? He should have already gotten her out of the car. He should have been in control. But now, as she steps out and stands before him, she's taller than he expected. Not physically, but in the way she holds herself. It's like she's towering over him, even though he's a good few inches taller. "Step over to the front of the car," he orders, his voice harsh. He's trying to keep the situation under control, but there's something in his gut telling him this is already slipping away. Something's off. Sarah, still calm, doesn't hesitate. She steps to the front of the car and waits. He starts his search of the vehicle, not really expecting to find anything. Just checking off the boxes. He opens the glove box, pulls out a few papers, flips through them. Nothing. He moves to the back seat, checks under the seat, opens the trunk, just routine stuff. But as he checks the side compartment near the driver's seat, his hand brushes against something solid. Something heavy. His fingers close around a cold metal object. A badge. Not just any badge. The gleaming, official emblem of the FBI. His pulse spikes, and his breath catches in his throat. He stares at the badge in his hand, the light from the sun gleaming off its surface. His fingers tremble. A cold sweat breaks out on the back of his neck. Sarah watches him, unmoving. Unconcerned. It takes Reynolds a long moment to realize what's happening, and when it hits him, it hits like a freight train. This isn't just any civilian. He's been messing with a federal agent. An FBI agent. The reality of it sinks in, and for a split second, his world narrows to a single point. The badge, the weight of it, the mistakes already made. He feels like the ground is falling away beneath him, like the pavement is rising to meet his face. He looks up at Sarah, and this time, she isn't just watching him with quiet intensity. There's a sharpness there now, a knowing glint in her eyes. She doesn't need to say a word. The message is clear. "I believe you found something you shouldn't have," she says, her voice cool, even as her eyes narrow slightly, just enough to show she's aware of the danger he's in. Reynolds opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. He tries again, but it's the same result. His mind is scrambling, trying to catch up, trying to think of something, anything, to salvage this. But the truth is, nothing will fix this now. The damage has already been done. I didn't realize," his voice falters, but he's not fooling anyone, least of all himself. He knows exactly what he's done. "You didn't realize because you didn't care," she cuts him off, her tone now cold as ice. "You saw someone you could push around, and you did. Without thinking. Now you're going to fix this." She takes a step closer to him, and even though she's a good 5 or 6 inches shorter, she feels like she's towering over him. There's no anger in her voice, no fire. It's something worse, disappointment. The kind of disappointment that comes from knowing you've crossed a line you'll never be able to erase. "I'll give you one chance, officer," she says, her voice low but firm. "Call your superior. Let's see how this plays out for you." Reynolds stumbles backward, his heart hammering in his chest. He pulls himself together as best he can, fighting the overwhelming urge to just turn and run. He doesn't, though. He knows he can't. Not now. He fumbles for his radio, his hands slick with sweat, his breath shallow and panicked. He presses the button and speaks, his voice cracking as he calls in the situation. He knows what's coming, and it's not good. Minutes feel like hours as he waits for his superior to arrive. He stands there, feeling every inch of his pride slip away, piece by piece. The sweat pours down his face. His heart pounds. And then, finally, he hears the screech of tires. His superior's car pulls up, and the door slams open. Reynolds straightens instinctively, but the attempt to regain some semblance of authority is futile. The superior doesn't say a word at first. He doesn't need to. He takes in the scene, looks at Reynolds, looks at Sarah, and all the disgust he needs to feel is etched into his face. "Get in the car," the superior says to Reynolds, his voice low and filled with venom. Reynolds feels his stomach drop. This is it. The end of his career, the end of any semblance of respect he ever had. There's nothing he can do to fix this. He's been caught, outmatched, outclassed. Sarah doesn't look at him again. She doesn't need to. She slides back into her car, the hum of the engine a sharp contrast to the suffocating silence that hangs in the air. Before she pulls away, she looks at Reynolds one last time, her eyes still steady. No anger, no triumph, just quiet power. "You should be careful, officer," she says, her voice smooth, final. "Next time, think before you act." And with that, she drives off. The sound of her car's engine fades into the distance, leaving Reynolds standing there, his superior's glare burning into him. There's no escaping it now. The mistake has been made, and it will follow him for the rest of his career. Reynolds watches her disappear into the horizon. The sun continues to beat down, unrelenting. It's just another day. But for him, it's the day everything changed. Reynolds stands frozen, the badge in his hand suddenly feeling as heavy as a boulder. His stomach lurches. He feels like the world around him has warped, like the ground beneath him is shifting. Every instinct in his body is screaming at him to fix this, but he doesn't know how. His fingers twitch around the cold metal, as though it might somehow slip from his grasp if he doesn't hold on tightly enough. The sunlight bounces off the badge, each reflection like a sharp stab in his gut. The letters FBI are seared into his vision, the acronym burning with a weight he can't escape. He stands there, his mind scrambling for a way out, his heart pounding in his chest like a drumbeat warning him of impending doom. His eyes flick up from the badge to Sarah's face. She's still standing there, calm and composed, her expression unreadable, almost bored. There's no fury in her gaze, no anger, just cold, unflinching professionalism. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows she holds all the cards, and there's nothing Reynolds can do about it now. For a moment, the air feels thick with tension, like it's closing in around him, suffocating him. He feels smaller by the second. His mind races, trying to grasp at something, anything, that could fix the situation. But the truth keeps slapping him in the face, he's outmatched. He's a cop who's just crossed a line that should have been left untouched. His voice cracks as he tries to speak, but the words come out all wrong. I didn't realize," the excuse hangs in the air, weak and pitiful. He knows it won't change anything. He knows the gravity of his mistake. "I didn't realize because you didn't care," Sarah interrupts, her voice a cool, measured tone. It's the kind of tone that makes you feel like you've just been caught in a lie, and now you're left with no way out. You saw an opportunity, and you took it. Without thinking. And now you're going to fix this. Her words cut through him like a blade. He wants to protest, wants to argue that he was just doing his job, but the truth is clearer now than ever. He wasn't doing his job. He was abusing his power. He wasn't in control of the situation, He was letting his arrogance drive him, and now he's facing the consequences. Sarah steps closer, just a step, but it feels like a leap. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't even blink. "Call your superior," she orders, her eyes never leaving his. There's no malice in her voice, no venom, just cold, hard expectation. Reynolds stumbles backward, his legs unsteady beneath him. His mind is reeling, but he knows what he has to do. He pulls himself together as best as he can, but the sweat on his brow is cold, and his heart is still hammering. He reaches for the radio, fumbling with the buttons, his hands slick with sweat. It feels like an eternity before he manages to call in the situation, his voice trembling as he speaks. The words are like lead in his mouth, every syllable dragging him further into the abyss. He waits for what feels like an age, standing there in the suffocating heat, trying to push down the rising tide of panic. He's afraid. Afraid of what's coming. Afraid of the repercussions. Afraid of what it means for his future. The quiet of the afternoon now feels oppressive, like the world is holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. And then, like a thunderclap, the screech of tires fills the air. Reynolds jerks his head toward the sound, his heart skipping a beat. A car pulls up, the door slamming open with a force that shakes him. His superior steps out, and it's immediately clear this is not going to be a simple conversation. The look on his superior's face is enough to make Reynolds' stomach drop. The superior doesn't say a word at first. He just looks at the scene before him. He sees Sarah standing there, calm as ever, and then his gaze shifts to Reynolds. It's all in the eyes, the disapproval, the disappointment. It's worse than any yelling, worse than any reprimand. Reynolds feels the weight of his superior's gaze like a physical blow. His knees almost buckle under the pressure. The silence is unbearable, and it stretches on for what feels like forever. Finally, his superior speaks, and the words are short, sharp, and final. "Get in the car." Reynolds stands motionless for a moment, frozen to the spot. He wants to argue, wants to plead his case, but he knows it's pointless. There's no way to talk his way out of this. He's already lost. He's been caught, and now he's about to face the consequences of his actions. He doesn't look at Sarah as he walks past her, but he can feel her eyes on him, like an anchor pulling him down. She doesn't say anything more. She doesn't need to. She's already said everything she needs to say. Reynolds climbs into the back of the cruiser, his movements stiff and mechanical. His superior doesn't say another word as he starts the engine. The silence between them is deafening, suffocating. Reynolds wants to scream, wants to break down, but he knows there's no point. He's a man who's lost everything. And the worst part is, it's all his own fault. The cruiser pulls away, and Sarah's car disappears from view, leaving Reynolds with nothing but the quiet hum of the engine and the gnawing realization that this mistake, this one moment of arrogance, will haunt him for the rest of his career. As the miles stretch out before them, Reynolds knows that no matter where he goes, no matter what he does, he will always carry the weight of this day. It will follow him like a shadow, a constant reminder of the line he crossed, and the person he tried to push around but could never break. The world slows down. The heat of the sun, once just a background hum of discomfort, now feels like a weight pressing down on him, suffocating him. It's as if the very air is thickening, becoming a physical barrier between Reynolds and the reality he can no longer escape. His heart races, every beat a sharp reminder of the mistake he's made. Sweat drips down his face, mixing with the dust of the street, but the physical discomfort pales in comparison to the burning humiliation spreading through him. He opens his mouth to speak, but his words are lost in the pit of his stomach. They don't come out, not the way he wants them to. Instead, they catch in his throat, strangled by the realization of how badly he's misjudged this entire situation. The arrogance, the sense of control, it all crumbles away. The confident officer, used to pushing people around, suddenly feels small. Utterly small. Sarah steps closer, but it's not a threatening move. It's deliberate, measured, and it cuts through the suffocating silence like a blade. Her voice is soft, but it's the kind of quiet that demands attention. "I believe you found something you shouldn't have." Her words hang in the air, like an accusation, but more than that, they carry a weight of finality. They signal the moment when everything shifts, when the quiet afternoon becomes something much darker. Reynolds opens his mouth, but it's like he's been struck dumb. His attempts to form an explanation are futile. I didn't realize. The words feel hollow, meaningless, and as soon as they leave his lips, he knows how pathetic they sound. He's already lost. He can feel it. He wants to shrink away, to disappear, but there's nowhere to run now. He's already dug his own grave. You didn't realize because you didn't care. Sarah's voice slices through again, smooth as ice, colder than the morning air. Her tone doesn't hold anger. It's not heated. It's controlled, measured. It's the voice of someone who has seen this before, who knows exactly what to do with people like him. Now, you're going to call your superior, and we'll see how this plays out. Reynolds opens his mouth again, trying to protest, to plead for a way out, but it's no use. The words evaporate as quickly as they form. Sarah turns her back to him, as effortlessly graceful as ever, and starts walking toward his cruiser. Her steps are steady, unwavering. She's done with him. She's already moved on, while Reynolds is still standing in the wreckage of his own pride. His mind is spinning. He can't focus, can't think. He stumbles toward the radio, his hands shaking so badly that he can barely grip the mic. His fingers are slick with sweat as he presses the button, his voice cracking as he tries to call in the situation. He knows, deep down, that this is it. This is the moment that will ruin him. He's harassed a federal agent, and now he has to face the consequences. His career, his reputation, his dignity, all of it hangs in the balance. The minutes drag on like hours. He stands there, the air around him heavy, thick with the weight of what's coming. The moment feels like it stretches out into eternity, each second adding to his mounting anxiety. He knows what's next. He doesn't need to hear the sirens. He can feel them coming, as if the entire universe is drawing in a deep breath, preparing to release the inevitable. And then, like the crack of thunder, the screech of tires pierces the air. Reynolds jerks his head toward the sound, his heart leaping into his throat. A car pulls up, and out steps his superior, a towering figure of authority. The storm clouds are gathering in his eyes. His face is hard, stone-cold. No words are needed. Just the look, the utter, complete disappointment, is enough to send a chill down Reynolds' spine. He can feel the weight of his superior's stare, and it's like an anchor pulling him deeper into the quicksand of his mistake. Reynolds stands at attention, stiff and motionless, but he's not fooling anyone. His shoulders are tight, his hands clenched, and his stomach churns with nausea. His superior takes in the scene with a single, appraising glance. He doesn't need to say a word. The look alone is enough to break Reynolds. It's the kind of look that says, asterisk, you've ruined everything. You've disappointed me. Asterisk. There's no escape. Reynolds is already in the depths of his failure, and his superior's gaze is the final nail in the coffin. The words come next, though they are slow and deliberate, each one a reminder of his shame. Get in the car. Reynolds stands frozen, unable to move, unable to comprehend what just happened. His mind is a blur, his body stiff and uncooperative. He knows he's about to lose everything, and it's the kind of loss that can't be fixed, not by apologies or explanations. He's crossed a line, and now he has to pay the price. Without a word, his superior climbs into the driver's seat of the cruiser. The silence between them is crushing. There's nothing left to say. Reynolds doesn't look at Sarah as he walks past her, but he can feel her presence, her gaze sharp and knowing, watching him as if she's already seen the end of this story. He climbs into the back seat, the door slamming behind him with a finality that echoes in his chest. The car pulls away, the engines hum, the only sound breaking the stillness. Reynolds slouches in his seat, his face pressed against the cool glass. His mind is racing, spinning in circles, but it's all for nothing. He knows what's coming. He knows that this is the day he will always look back on, the moment when everything changed. And there's no going back from it. In the distance, Sarah's car disappears from view, her tail lights fading into the horizon. The hum of the engine is all that remains, a soft, almost mocking sound that fills the air with the weight of what Reynolds has lost. His superior doesn't speak. There's nothing to say. As they drive away, Reynolds can't shake the feeling that this will haunt him forever. Every turn of the wheel, every passing second, just serves to remind him of the choices he made, the choices that led him to this moment. And he knows, deep down, that he'll never escape it. The mistake he made today will follow him like a shadow, one that will never fade.